for someone who was 25 years old when she graduated with an MFA, there's a whole lot of time in between where you start to think to yourself, maybe I will never sell a book. I wrote this book in about 2 months, but then I had a longer editing process. So I was
Wow.
writing over 2,000 words a day in the morning. Big advance might not be the best advance to take, especially on debut. Um, there's a real crisis of the sophomore effort.
Hello, and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelly Vick, and that was Hannah Selinger. Hannah's a James Beard Award nominated lifestyle writer and mother of two based in Boxford, Massachusetts. She's the author of the memoir Cellar Rat: My Life in the Restaurant Underbelly, and her fiction debut, literary thriller Valley of the Moms, is out now. Hannah's print and digital work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, Eater, Travel and Leisure, Food and Wine, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and elsewhere. In this episode, we'll talk about the difference in memoir and fiction debuts, what works and what doesn't for marketing books in today's environment, and the counterintuitive thing you might want to consider when it comes to your debut book advance. All that and much more. So let's get started. Hannah Selinger, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your twisty debut thriller, Valley of the Moms. Author Amanda Eyre Ward says, "Is there anything better than a dark thriller about suburban moms with secrets?" In Hannah Selinger's beautifully written debut, a dead body is found in the frozen Ipswich River. A grieving husband becomes the prime suspect, and a cutthroat cadre of moms closes ranks. Featuring complex characters and a thrilling satiric bite, Valley of the Moms kept me turning pages all night. Author Kelsey Cox says sleek, smart, and deliciously unnerving, Valley of the Moms peels back the glamorous veneer of privilege and perfection, exposing the dangerous illusion of having it all. And author Daria Lavelle says, unsettling, heart-pounding, and full of rich characters and deep betrayals, Valley of the Moms will have you questioning how much you can really know about the women in your life. So, with that, welcome, Hannah, again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And what can you tell us about Valley of the Moms? How do you describe the book?
For me, it's a book not just about what it's about, which is a conflict that begins with a murder and that is also on its face about struggles with literally a parent-teacher organization in a wealthy town north of Boston in Massachusetts, but also about communities, privilege, secrets, and on some level, marriage.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's relatable even to people who haven't lived in wealthy communities. What things we tell our spouses, what things we tell our friends, what things we keep near to ourselves, what things kind of go with us to the grave.
Yeah, all the different masks that we might wear at any given time, right? What was the spark that started this off for you?
Sure. I actually got into a bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, um, with my own parent-teacher organization in Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts originally. I grew up here and then I lived in New York for many different times, but the most recently I was in New York for 17 years, and my husband and I moved back here 4 years ago, and almost immediately when we moved back, I got into a situation with the parent-teacher organization about a dance and sort of a tiered system that they were charging money for the public school. Um, and I leaked it to the press, and it became this whole thing. And while I was involved in this, I was thinking, what if it was more than just what it was? What if it was something more nefarious? Um, what if there were worse intentions, and what if things got so exaggerated that there was a murder? And it wasn't, didn't take such a leap of imagination to think about wealthy communities that would do really extreme things to protect their own interests. I was thinking about um, Lori Loughlin and the college scandal that had happened around that same time, and the extreme things that wealthy people would do to protect their own interests. And that got me thinking, well, um, what if a scenario unfolded that were extreme, but not really extreme? And so that's kind of where it started.
I love that the PTO tiered paying for the dance ticket system came out of reality. As I was reading, I thought, wonder if this this happened somewhere. So can we expect that your characters might be plucked from a little bit of real life, or how do your characters come to you?
The actual characters in the book are fictional. I mean, these are not real people, and this is not really my town. In fact, my agents heavily advised that I did not set this in the town that I was living in, um, for fear that I get real life murdered. Um, and the main character has some elements in common with me as kind of a joke, but it's not actually me. And the main male protagonist, because this is a dual POV book set in two timelines, um, has really no resemblance to my husband. And I think, he read it, I think probably assuming that it was going to sound like him or resemble him, but it's not. Anyone who knows my husband would know that this is not anything like him. He doesn't, that's not his career. This isn't what he's like. He would probably not be searching for a murderer. He would definitely defer to the police department. Um, so, although there's a kernel of truth in the beginning of the idea, I would say that the rest of it is purely fiction.
So, how do those, from a craft standpoint, how do you get to know your characters? And because they're really richly drawn on the page. So, is that something that do you sort of just sit down and free write and get to know them that way? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think, I had ideas about who they were going to be, and dialogue helps.
Mhm.
I don't I've lived having lived in this area for a long time. There were certain speech patterns that I knew I wanted to attribute to them, and certain characteristics. There's a police officer in there who um, played hockey growing up, and so his moniker is Sticks, which is sort of a very local thing that somebody would grow up playing hockey. There are mannerisms. There are, as I mentioned, patterns of speech. I think a lot about when I'm writing people like Richard Russo who sit around notoriously in diners and study
Mm.
what people say, and he literally writes down people's dialogue. I listen a lot to what people say. I've written down dialogue from people in real life and taken notes from that. um, and there have been scenarios that I've experienced in life where I've not copied the exact scenarios, but I've thought, okay, this would something like this would make a good scene in a book. You don't copy the exact thing, but maybe something you witness would be sort of correlative in a scene in fiction. So I think there's a lot of borrowing that goes on um,
Mm.
when you translate something. Maybe you have an experience and you fit that into something that you're working on, and that's part of your craft.
Yeah. You mentioned the dual POV, dual timeline that we're working with in this book. We have Anna's point of view, who we find out very early on is deceased in her husband's timeline, his narrative present. How did that dual POV, dual timeline structure come about? Did you know that you wanted to do it like that from the beginning, or was that something that evolved as you were sort of working through the story?
I did know from the very beginning that I wanted to switch back and forth. It was a way for me to be able to build tension and also sustain the mystery so that it wasn't just, you know, I mean, you have to think that the book works backwards because the murder is revealed immediately in the prologue of the
Mhm.
book. So I wanted to be, it would have been really quick and obvious to just in a chronological or linear way to reveal sort of what happens to her. And I wanted to be able to sustain the tension. And it's a slow burn. This isn't a
Mhm.
very like high stakes, quick burning thriller. It's a slow literary thriller. So in order to sustain that tension, I wanted to be able to move between two characters and each perspective. And there's more than just what happened to her and how did it happen? There's also, what's happening in her marriage and what things did she fail to reveal and what things did he learn about his wife through investigating the murder of her or, there are all these sort of different elements that are at play that go beyond just how did she die? So that came into play as I was structuring the book.
So, did you always know who would be telling the story as well? Did you know that it was going to be Anna and Denny?
Yeah, from the very beginning as I was writing it. And I actually did I tend to write as I'm working on these pieces, I tend to write in order. So I was kind of outlining it. I didn't have a full outline as I was going through, but I was outlining, maybe 5 chapters in advance and I knew sort of where that was going to fall and then I was writing in order of those chapters.
So, you're bouncing back and forth
Yeah.
as you're writing instead of going all the way through one POV
Yeah.
and then all the way through the other one. What does your process look like from sort of that spark of the idea to the end? How does it?
Yes. Well, for this book, and I've written another book since, which will be out next year. And I'm working on even another book now. I sit down early in the morning and I write. For this one, I was writing. I wrote this book in about 2 months, but then I had a longer editing process. So I was
Wow.
writing over 2,000 words a day in the morning um, like before I was moving on with the rest of my day. I'm a fast writer. I came from journalism, so I'm like, almost perpetually on deadline.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would recommend writing quite so quickly. And I had a lot of edits, not just with my editor, but my agents and I did a lot of editing before we even went out on submission with this. Um, Different process with like my leader, with a manuscript that I have that will be published in 2027, but um, sort of a furious like getting it on paper and then moving on and then getting more on paper and just kind of quickly moving through the narrative arc and sort of seeing where it landed.
Do you know how it's going to end? Are you sort of aiming for the ending as you start? Or I know you said you outlined maybe like 5 chapters ahead, but not the whole thing. Are you sort of plotting, pantsing? What does all of that look like?
I did not know where this book was ending. My next book was completely different because I sold the book on outline, so I actually did know where the book was going to end, but I didn't sell it on a complete manuscript, so that was really different. So I had the whole outline. And my first book, which was a memoir, I sold on proposal, so I did also know where that book was ending. So this was a completely different situation for me where like almost like the characters told me where they were going.
Mhm.
Um, I'm doing the same thing. I'm working on another manuscript right now where I'm kind of letting it go where it goes, and it has sort of twisted and turned in different ways that I didn't expect, which is an interesting. I don't know that all writers move back and forth between these two methods of like, sometimes plotting and sometimes not plotting, but it's working for me.
So project to project, sometimes
Yes,
plotting, sometimes not plotting. I feel like
exactly.
a lot of people say they do a mixture of plotting and pantsing
Yes.
within one project, but I love that you're like, no, some of them are fully plotted and some of them are.
However I feel.
I love that, and it's very honest, I think. Um, this is definitely a twisty, fun, satiric
Yes.
bite of a thriller. But as you alluded to before, also very layered, literary, also about grief.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it is about grief. I think, certainly from Jenny's perspective, and I think also from Anna's perspective, I I think it's important to recognize in any thriller that the characters are considering, any thriller hinges on probably the almost certainly the loss of a character. And
Mm,
you one thing that I was looking at sort of in the initial drafts of this was that we were lacking, or maybe I was lacking, the context in which the character was absent. Like what were her family members going through? What were they experiencing? I've gone through a lot of loss in my own life. My father died 15 years ago, in July, and it took sort of secondary and tertiary looks at the book to think, okay, well, it's not just about her, it's also about the reverberation of her absence that's important to the book.
mm,
And um, that makes it profound, right? That makes a thriller more than just a whodunit. Um,
mm.
that's what makes it resonate, I think, with the audience. So it is about grief, and I think that's part of what makes his story more important than just him searching for her killer.
What draws you to the thriller genre? Are your upcoming projects thrillers?
The next book is a mystery, and I think it would be probably classified as more of a mystery than a thriller. But it's still in that sort of same mystery suspense.
Mm,
And then the next book after that is mystery suspense thriller. Yes. Um, I like puzzles. I like
mm.
figuring out puzzles. I like the idea that people can um, be, that people are complex, that they can both be um, a part of society and also do bad, crazy, terrible things, but that they still have sort of a human element to them. Nobody is, well, there are some people that are just bad, right? But then there are people who demonstrate sincere good, but that they also do terrible things. That's an interesting sort of quality of human nature to me.
Mhm.
Um, all of the people, even the people that you see on Dateline, they're complex. People who kill their spouses. I'm not saying that Denny killed his spouse, but people who kill their spouses, they're complex. People who kill their friends are complex. People who, all of these people, there's no sort of single equation about why someone murders another person.
Do you watch a lot of Dateline?
I do watch a lot of Dateline. Can
Did you watch more Dateline as you began working on Valley of the Moms and the subsequent mysteries,
I don't
or
think I
is that
watched
always
any
been?
more. I don't think I watched any more than I ordinarily watch. I mean, one thing about Dateline is that Dateline is formulaic, which I think helps when you're crafting a thriller. Maybe it helps and maybe it hurts, but um, Dateline is a formula, which is to say
Mhm.
that it's pattern based, and you can typically predict very early on who the killer is because there are tells. For instance, they almost never have an interview with the person who is the killer early on in the show because that person is presumably either on trial or in prison. And so you notice quite early on that that there's sort of an absence, and it's usually that's usually your tell. Like, oh, well, we haven't seen an interview with the spouse, or we haven't seen an interview with this friend, or this shopkeeper is like mysteriously absent from this narrative. And then later on, you're like, okay, well, that's obviously the prime suspect. They're probably guilty. Um, that can be something to avoid when you're crafting a thriller if you're hoping to keep suspense high and you don't necessarily want to tip your hat at who the actual person responsible for the murder is.
Hmm.
Um, Dateline wants to be formulaic. Like, there's comfort in something that's formula based. They understand that they've developed a recipe over the past 30 years that draws people in, and people will tell you that watching Dateline can be very soothing. That's not necessarily what you want in a literary thriller, but um, watching those shows can actually be informative if, as you're translating that to a different genre, if you're looking to avoid certain pitfalls.
I've never thought about it like that before, and I love that. Now I feel like I need to go and watch. I need to go and watch a lot more Daylight.
Friday at 9 p.m.
Appointment viewing, or now streaming. This is your fiction debut, but not your publishing debut. We
Right.
alluded to. You published an acclaimed memoir last year, right? Just last year, Cellar Rat, My Life in the Restaurant Underbelly. So, I wanted to get into the publishing weeds a little bit with you, if that's okay,
Yeah.
and find out how you find the debut experience with memoir versus fiction.
Yeah. Actually, that was quite horrible. I'm glad to be in a different genre. The thing about memoir, is that it is about your lived experience, and any negative feedback that you get feels like a personal indictment, right? So let's say, and this is just hypothetical. Let's say hypothetically that the New York Times, 2 weeks before your book were to be published, were to pan you on the cover of the New York Times book review. Let's just say
Hypothetically.
hypothetically, that I'm not saying that this really happened. And that hypothetically, they were to say that you were petty and mean, and hypothetically, they were to write in the book review that your narrative recounting of sexual assaults was narratively inconvenient because it appeared in chapter 5. Let's just say that that were their editorial take on your work that you have crafted. That would feel like a personal indictment and not an editorial or craft-based indictment, right? It would feel personal and not editorial. On the fiction side, and I haven't gotten any real reviews. I haven't gotten any reviews from the Times yet, or any real, I haven't gotten any, like I'm not in full review mode yet. But if I were to get a bad review from the Times at this point, it would feel far removed from my person. It wouldn't feel like
Mhm.
I was being attacked for me. It would feel like I was being attacked for my work, or for the edits, or for the plot, or for the structure, which is to say, fine,
Mhm.
there's plenty of room for improvement as a debut novelist, even at 45 years old. That's a different sort of feeling than having someone say all of those other things that they said about me, which really can be perceived as saying things about me as a person.
Mhm.
Um, so I think this time around feels cleaner and easier, irrespective of what feedback I get from the sort of, you know, echo chamber or whatever it is.
Yeah. Did it make you want to stop writing memoir?
No, I mean, I'm not, look, I don't, I've been working as a journalist for 15 years or whatever, and the for the most part, I don't read the comments. I think the problem is that
Mhm.
you are really assaulted with it when you come out with a book and you have no way of escaping it. I'm not intimidated by like the negative things that people, reviewers or otherwise, say about my work. And I certainly don't like go in there and perseverate over like Goodreads comments or whatever. But you know, it's unfriendly and it doesn't make you like it's not it doesn't make you like run out and want to it's I think it it doesn't dissuade me from wanting to write another memoir. And in fact, I had pitched another memoir, but as it turns out, I sold a two-book deal in fiction after this. So I am fine revealing more about my life, and I'm not afraid to take to the page again. That being said, I feel like it's easier
Mm.
to do this kind of work because it's less personal. And I don't want anyone public to feel like they shamed me or silenced me because of the things that they said about me, because that's not true. But it certainly um, isn't for the faint of heart.
Yeah. What was the road to publication like for you with the memoir and then with the fiction?
Um, well, I mean, I think it was long. I graduated from my Master of Fine Arts in 2005, actually with an MFA in fiction. And even though I became a successful journalist and I was nominated for a James Beard Award in 2021, I think I was nominated, maybe 2022. Um, it took a long time to actually get a book deal. My book deal was, I got my book deal in the winter of 2023. And, for someone who was 25 years old when she graduated with an MFA, there's a whole lot of time in between where you start to think to yourself, maybe I will never sell a book. And to
Mm.
come to peace with that and sort of say, well, maybe I just will never sell a book. Maybe that is it.
Mhm.
Certainly had put to rest the idea that I was ever going to be a novelist. And so now at 45, almost 46, to have a debut out and actually to know that I have two more novels on the horizon with a two book coming up in 27 and 28. Um, and obviously with no idea how the performance will be, although this book, Valley of the Moms, is actually the Barnes and Noble book pick for the month of June. I can tell
Yay!
you, yes.
Yay!
So that's exciting. But you know, it's it feels like a big milestone. Like it feels like I have come a long way, and but it has been a long road. And it's not like I had given up hope or like, but I had become very comfortable with the idea of just being a journalist, and which isn't to say just being a journalist, but I had sort of thought to myself, okay, well then this is what I'm going to do, and I
Mhm.
will be a journalist, and maybe I won't be an author, and maybe that's okay.
Mhm.
So that was it was a long road. And being nominated for the James Beard Award certainly changed my life and gave me access to literary agents. And that was really the defining moment for me. But I had really thought for a long time that I probably wouldn't be doing this.
So you're nominated for the James Beard. You then, was it at that point that you got your agent?
I was approached by two different literary agents shortly thereafter. I published a piece that was nominated after I was nominated for the Beard Award. I also published a piece in the New York Times Magazine. Both of those were pretty visible pieces. And then I was
Mm.
approached by two different literary agents. I had meetings with both of them, and I was signed by an agent without having a book proposal. And we worked on a book proposal together in the fall of 2022. And we sold the book, Seller Rat in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you're going through all of the promotion and everything that goes with that. How did Valley of the Moms come about?
I was working on Valley of the Moms. Well, so as Cellar Rat was being like Cellar Rat was done, I had written Cellar Rat and we were like getting ready to, we were in the year before Cellar Rat came out. So we were kind of in the like initial marketing phase and thinking about it. And I went to my agents and I was like, well, I have this idea for a book and here's like a prologue for it. And they
Mm.
were like, yes, like you should write it. And so I just sort of sat down and I wrote it. And then I sent them a draft and they were like, we think this is great. Here's some edits you need to do before we go out on submission with it. And so we did that um, for a couple of months. And then we went out with it in the summer of 2024. Um, and sold it to Little Brown, my existing publisher.
Hmm.
Um, we sold it, um, we sold it like early fall. So we went out in the summer and we sold it early fall. So it wasn't that long. It was pretty fast.
Wow. And it was was Valley of the Moms the two-book deal, or there was a two-book deal
No.
afterwards?
So we sold that in the early fall, and then after we sold that, but obviously before it came out,
Hmm.
um, let me think. When did we sell? Oh, so this was last July. Last June, actually, yes, last June, I went to my agents either last May or last June, and I was like, I think I want to write this other book. I had already gone to my book editor and I had floated an idea to her about what I wanted to write for a follow-up book to Valley of the Moms.
Hmm.
But my option contract did not specify that I had to write a full manuscript. And so then I went to my agents and I said, what if we were to like propose an option on both books? I had an option clause on my nonfiction on Cellarat, and I had an
Hmm.
option clause on Valley of the Moms. So I wrote a proposal for nonfiction and I wrote a full outline for a follow-up book to Valley of the Moms.
Mhm.
And we went out to Little Brown with it. And they came back and they said, actually, what we would like is instead of the nonfiction, we want to offer you a two-book deal on fiction. We'll take that outline. We say yes to that, and then
Mhm.
we'll offer you an undisclosed second book on fiction. So a two-book fiction deal for books for 27 and 28. You don't even have to write them yet. They're due in March of 2026 and in I don't even know when the one for I don't know when the next one's due. It says it in my contract. I'm working on it now. But I filed the one that's coming out in 2027. I filed it to them in November. So it's in production and it comes out in April.
That sounds both wonderful and terrifying. It sounds like the
Stressful.
dream, and it also sounds very stressful.
It's stressful. Um, I mean, the stressful part now is that like I'm managing two books at the same time. So like I have like proofreading stuff going on for a book that's coming out next year while I am 2 weeks out from a book that's publishing. So I'm managing like the publicity stuff for that. The book that's out next year, I can like, I can punt a little bit. Like I can kind of be like, I really can't deal with this quite right now. I have an independent publicist. And so um the nice thing is that because I'm keeping her on for the next book, she can kind of already start to manage the next book,
Mhm.
which is that's an advantage. But yes, I'm not really prepared to deal with another book right now. Like I can't conceive of this. This is very far away from me. But a year is actually not that long gestation wise for a book. So and it's less than a year.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, we'll have galleys too soon. And I'm like, that I can't look at any more materials right this second. So
What is your typical day, your daily routine
yeah.
like?
I try to write between 6 and 7 a.m. Um, I try to write about 1,000 words in that period of time before my children are awake. Because I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, two sons.
Mm.
And then I still freelance full time. So, for instance, I have a print assignment that's due for travel and leisure right now, and a print assignment that's due for food and wine. So I'm managing those. And last week I was traveling on assignment. So,
Do you sleep?
very little. I was up at 5 today. I try to sleep until 6, but and during the day I try to do those other like my work things.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm on right now, I'm doing more press stuff, obviously, because I'm in the last push before my book comes out. And then I usually am done working around 3 because that's when my kids get out of school. And then that's it. But I would say between like 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., I'm doing my normal job stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether that's media things or freelance work. Um,
How
yeah.
do you keep from burning out?
I have taken on fewer freelance projects since I started being on book contract, and that has helped. I was burning the candle at both ends, and it was too much for me. And so last summer, I really took on almost nothing. I'm lucky in which, I'm lucky in that I have advances, and so that can kind of float me financially. And I'm lucky that my husband has like I want to say a real job, like a a salaried position with health insurance. Um, and I can pick and choose at this point if I want to take on more or less work. And so, this summer I'll take on less. I'm on book tour. Um, but yeah, it can be a lot. I used to take on way more freelance work and I've pulled back on that.
Are you still doing coaching and editing for other writers, or is that
Yeah.
pulled back?
Although I've pulled back. So right now I have 2 book proposal clients.
Mm.
But those meet less frequently and you know, it's just the scope is different. I'm much more choosy about those clients. I do also ghostwriting, but like right now I only have one ghostwriting client, and I'm at the end of a project, and I won't take anything else on until fall because I can't take anything on over the summer with book tour.
And is your brain just, do you have some sort of ritual or some way that you're kind of clearing your brain from working on one project and then going on to the next? Because it sounds like you have so many going on at once.
Spreadsheets. I have like spreadsheets and lists. I have to write things down physically. I
Mhm.
have like a million calendar stuff updates. I have like a list that I keep by my computer of like what I have to do. I don't think I would survive. I'm also like, at 46, almost everything just slips through your sieve of a brain. So I have to write everything down. But yeah, I just, yes. And I also am a front loader. So like the minute I get something, I have to do it immediately so that I
Mm.
don't forget. I don't procrastinate anything. I find that that's really the devil's playground for me. If I like put something off, I'll lose it. So yeah.
Have you always been a writer?
Yes. Really like since I'm a kid. Yeah.
Do you have like an earliest memory of writing?
Yeah, I have this. I wish I could show it to you. I have this like little, when I was in like the first or second grade, we made these books with old wallpaper samples. Like they like had us cover them in school with like
Mhm.
old wallpaper. I don't even know. And it's so funny because my kids didn't know what it was. They were like, "What's the cup?" They were like, "You bound these," and I was like, "No, that's called wallpaper." But we made these books in school, and I still have a couple of them from like my old house when I was a kid.
Oh, I love that. I feel like we did something like that at my elementary school. We had a school publishing company, and you would write your stories, and they would go off to the publishing company, which was actually like volunteer moms that were,
Right.
you know, covering pieces of cardboard and contact paper,
Yes.
making like book covers.
My gosh, remember contact paper?
Yes. What do you know now that you wish you'd known before publishing your first book?
Honestly, wish I had known that legacy media is not the end all be all. Like it doesn't drive book sales as much as you think it will.
Mm.
But there are other ways to get people to buy your book, that don't involve like, I did a lot of chasing. Cellar Rat appeared in every legacy media outlet. Like it was covered by the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. May their book review section rest in peace because it doesn't exist anymore. The New York Post covered it. Um, would you believe that they still have a book review section? The the New York Times, of course, Bloomberg, like literally everybody. Um, but those things didn't drive book sales. Like honestly, the one legacy media outlet that really drove book sales on that book was People.
Mm.
People really do still
Mhm.
buy recommendations from People magazine. Um, Bookstagram drive so many more book sales than any of that. And I did not appreciate that at the time. So my tack has been so different on marketing this book
Mm.
and enlisting people to help me market this book. I wish I had known that and getting the word out more on that. I mean, it's good that I know it now. I was
Yeah.
experienced, but um, the media landscape has changed so dramatically, and I wasted so much time chasing these opportunities and like really just like trying to get my name into these outlets and it didn't really matter all that much. The prestige that you think matters, like it doesn't matter. What matters is like whether or not people are buying your book and
Yeah.
who cares where you appear as long as people are hitting click.
And is it Bookstagram and not Book Talk or all
I
of
mean,
them or
all of it,
all of it?
whatever, book fluencers, people with big followings who can convert um that into a sale.
Yeah.
They have more power than legacy media right now. I don't know if that will be enduring, but that is true right now.
That's a really great tip, really, for everybody with their book marketing. What is your best advice for aspiring authors?
My best advice for aspiring authors. Um, this is going to be like very controversial, but
Great.
the big advance might not be the best advance to take, especially on debut. Um, there's a real crisis of the sophomore effort. Almost nobody earns out on their first book. And I see a lot of people who accept these absolutely astronomical first advances, high six-figure, some low seven-figure advances, and then go on to try to sell a second book after underperforming on a first book, and nobody will accept that second book, or they get lowballed on a second book offer because they have over accepted. The conventional wisdom has always been to take the biggest offer on your debut because you may never sell another book, but it is a far safer bet to take a mid-list offer or a medium offer on your first book so that you can continue publishing for the rest of your life.
What a new way to think about it. That's a really, that is a hot tip. Traditional last question. We have a traditional last question on this podcast, and it is when Valley of the Moms is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Oh my gosh. Well, I really want it to be something from the Indigo Girls.
I love it.
Um, I want it to be closer to fine because that's just it feels right. But it probably should be. See, like now, if you had asked me this 6 months ago, I would have also probably said something by the Lemonheads because they're so Massachusetts and like I love Evan Dando, but then Evan Dando got super creepy on the internet and it was revealed that he was doing like very, very untoward things to women, like
Ooh.
showing himself in ways that can't be repeated in polite company. So I have since revoked my endorsement of Evan Dando. So now I can't say that it's going to be a Lemonheads theme song either. I'll go back to the Indigo Girls.
I think that's an excellent, excellent choice. It does feel right. We'll look forward to the series or movie and the Indigo Girls soundtrack.
Perfect.
Hannah Selinger, thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.